I see that a couple of you have raised your hands. If you have questions, I have everybody muted so there's not echoing. If you have questions, you can use the chat area, and I'll take a look and try to address any questions as they come up. We've got a lot of material that we're gonna try to cover, so we're gonna try to power through most of this. But if there are any technical difficulties or any problems with the audio or the visual, please let us know. I'm going to go ahead and put everybody's hand down that had it up now, and then just let me know if there's still a problem or anything using the chat. And if you can't use that for whatever reason, give us a call, and somebody here will be able to help. That number is 800-713-0161. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Dan Jaffe. I'm the CEO of Lawlytics and one of the co-founders. I'm also an attorney. Before going into technology full-time, I built and grew 2 successful law practices. The first was in Seattle and then one in the Phoenix area. I built my law firm's first website in 1999 in Seattle when the internet was pretty much just getting started as a way of people connecting online. I saw results immediately that I could measure, and I was hooked. Since then, I've been obsessed with the numbers that make a difference when it comes to generating law firm business in the most cost-efficient and sustainable way. And I say sustainable because I look at internet marketing for attorneys as a long-term proposition. Anybody can get good short-term results by using tricks, but the way that I look at it is if you follow the data, you can build something that's sustainable and that will pay off for years to come. Without the data and the tools to understand what drives results, law firms are forced to leave their firm's business to chance and to what I used to do in the early days, to gut feelings. The problem is, with so many points of data out there, and there are literally, we're going to talk about a study today where we looked at about 750,000 visits to law firm websites, and out of just over a 4-month period, out of those visits, there are tens of millions of points of data that can and ought to really be considered. There are so many ways that clients and referral sources can interact with the typical law firm and law firm's website that gut feelings are oftentimes just inaccurate. We built the Lawlytics software suite to give attorneys access to powerful data about their flow of new clients and combine that with an easy-to-use and intuitive way to act upon the intelligence that data would then provide. As Lawlytics has grown both as a software platform and as a service, the data that we have available to us has vastly expanded. We're now able to spot trends and notice subtle changes in the way a broad spectrum of potential clients across a broad geographic area and also referral sources and others interact with autonomous law firm websites. And when I say autonomous law firm websites, I mean an individual website owned by an individual law firm on its own domain name on the internet. This webinar is going to be a short explanation of the most recent set of data that we've collected and analyzed. It's over the last few months. And although we have data that goes back much further than that, we felt it was more relevant to concentrate on the last few months because the way that this data looks changes so fast that we want a more recent snapshot. The data that we're going to present will be collective data, and it's derived from many attorney web properties across the United States. The data is proprietary, and we're releasing some of our conclusions, but we won't be releasing the raw data itself. This webinar is open to the public, and about half of the people registered are currently Lawlytics members or customers. For those of you who are Lawlytics members, we'll be doing a follow-up presentation the next month or so explaining how the Lawlytics software is evolving and adapting based on this data and other changes that we're noticing. all of the changes that are made to the Lawlytics system are automatically reflected within your Lawlytics account. So there's nothing that you need to do to benefit from them. In the coming weeks, this is for Lawlytics members, and then we'll get to stuff that's applicable to everybody in just a moment. In the coming weeks, we're going to be rolling out an improved analytics and client flow measurement dashboard. For those Lawlytics members whose sites are currently getting about 3,000 or fewer unique visitors per month, you're going to notice maybe some performance changes, but not anything really significant. For those who have 20,000 or more unique visitors, the change will be profound. It'll go a lot faster. And for those of you that have 50,000 or more visitors per month, you'll actually now be able to finally access all of your stats and traffic live. Some of the Lawlytics members that are on here have hundreds or even thousands of leads in your Lawlytics management system. And we've noticed that some of you have been deleting them when they're no longer leads, either because they became a client or because they didn't become a client. We're developing tools that will make it easier for us and for you to parse the data, such as which pages, blog posts, and even social media posts exert an influence over those potential clients as they move through the pipeline of becoming leads and then contacting the firm and then either retaining or not, as the case may be. So instead of deleting those leads from the system, if you just simply move them to either won leads or lost leads in the lead center, that will preserve that data for you to be able to better understand the flow of clients and what influences them, especially as you accumulate more leads within the Lawlytics system. For those of you listening today who are not Lawlytics members, we're going to be presenting a lot of useful intelligence that you can use as well. At a very minimum, I hope that this information will get you thinking about how you, along with your webmaster, SEO person, or whoever it is that may be working on your firm's web presence, should approach measuring and improving the performance of your web presence. The main goal, at least as I see it, for a law firm online, should be to make your cost per client acquisition as low as possible. Achieving peak efficiency and therefore getting the highest return on investment does not happen by accident, and it's now more of a science than it is an art. And I hope that you'll share our conclusion that while the design of your website is very important, and it's good for branding, it's good for emotional response, it's good for many, many things, the design needs to be based on tested principles and on ongoing data analysis rather than just on subjective taste. If you're a Lawlytics member, it's good to be aware of what we're presenting, and it can and should help you make good choices when it comes to any styling of your site, any additions of pictures and stuff that you may do on your own. For example, if you regularly add to your front page, for example, if you add images to the slider or elsewhere, and this is especially true on the home page, but it can really apply anywhere, be aware of how the pictures look in the largest desktop view, so like a 27-inch monitor with a high-resolution screen, as well as the smallest smartphone, so an iPhone or an Android device. And we'll get to all of why that matters in a little bit. Lawlytics has built-in analytics that you can use to track your website's progress and make informed decisions about the kinds of content that work and what doesn't. If you have more than one website hosted on Lawlytics, the system will seamlessly integrate that data from all of your websites so you can see how one affects another. Lawlytics also allows you to add any and every other third-party analytics package. So if you want, you can add a second or a third analytics package to have multiple points of verification. The most popular third-party analytics package is Google Analytics. If you're not on Lawlytics, there's a good chance that your webmaster uses Google Analytics if they take any kind of data-driven approach. When we take over websites from other providers, and this goes for independent SEO people, working in their homes, and it also goes for some of the largest legal marketing companies that have been around and established for years, we're often surprised to see the lack of analytics, even though these providers ostensibly supplied the attorneys with monthly and quarterly reports. And oftentimes that data just disappears as the previous vendor is handing over the keys. The most important investment of your time that I shouldn't say the most important, one of the most critical investments that you can make of your time, an investment in your law firm's web presence, is to learn how to understand the data. And once you really understand how the data works and what it signifies, your eyes will probably be open, and there's a drastically reduced possibility that you'll be fooled by a marketer and their reports. And I'm going to get to this a little more in the end of this webinar. If your vendor is still talking in terms of hits and using that word, you're probably being grossly underserved. If you're not on Lawlytics, which gives you real-time access to your analytics, at a very minimum, you should insist on unfettered access to your analytics. So, in other words, tell your webmaster, I want direct access to Google Analytics or whatever it is that you use. I don't want it filtered through any reports that you send, although you certainly can send me reports to make it easier to understand. But I want that data available to me so I can drill down and I can really understand what's going on, and I can have it independently verified. We see millions of points of data come through the Lawlytics system. The specifics of what we are seeing is confidential, and we're not at liberty to disclose the results of any particular Lawlytics customer, nor use any of them as examples. The data that's used in the study that I'm about to share some points of with you was permission-based. In other words, if you're a Lawlytics customer and we didn't specifically discuss using your data as part of the pool that comprised this study, then your data was not used. The data also only uses law firms who have been on Lawlytics for at least 6 months and who utilize built-in forms, which is a function of Lawlytics, as well as Lawlytics form tracking and client tracking features. This study that we're about to go into is not a peer-reviewed study. And while we believe that the results are generally applicable, there are some limitations inherent in our methodology that may affect the results. And I think you ought to be aware of those so you can take this for what it's worth as I present it. First of all of the sites observed were powered by Lawlytics in the Lawlytics software suite. This means that they all use the same technology. All Lawlytics sites employ what's called responsive design, and this means that the site automatically adapts to present all of the site's content optimally, regardless of whether the device is a cell phone, a huge desktop monitor, a tablet, or anywhere in between. And we use several points of gradation when we talk about our responsive design. Some web vendors say, okay, it's responsive if there's one desktop version and one mobile version and it switches. We use a staged approach where as the screen gets smaller, everything changes. So no matter where it's viewed, it looks good. And so when you're looking at the data in the study, especially when it comes to the mobile data, that's important to keep in mind because the numbers may be different with different technologies and different ways of presenting websites. We made the decision a couple of years ago to go all in on responsive, and it's built into the Lawlytics suite in every website that the suite produces. We did it because we feel that objectively it's a superior way to present web content, and the data from Google and their guidelines seems to indicate that Google prefers it as well. This study obviously does not include any data regarding behavior of visitors that use older mobile technologies. Second, because all of the sites used in this study are in fact optimized by Lawlytics, we acknowledge that different platforms may produce different results. The study therefore cannot be comparative in nature. We're simply conveying what we observed based on a meaningful subject sample size, so please take that for what it's worth. While keeping the limitations of this data in mind, if the study and the conclusions that I'm about to share get you thinking about better measuring your firm's online performance, then it will have served its purpose. We don't often talk about the numbers and the science behind Lawlytics, and for those of you who are already members, if this webinar inspires you to start using the client tracking capabilities, that would be a victory for both you and for us, as you'll be a step closer to realizing some of the additional potential that your Lawlytics membership has for your firm. With that, let's jump in. I want to start off with a simple but profound premise, and it's foundational. Today, in April of 2014, we start with the premise that it's safe to assume that if your firm has a client that can afford to pay your firm's fees, that client has access to the internet, has internet-connected devices, and will interact with your law firm's web presence at some point during the relationship, and oftentimes at multiple points throughout the client life cycle. I want to start with one of what I feel is the more important conclusions from our research, and then I'll get into the details. Clients who have already engaged a law firm or who are direct referrals use attorneys' websites, oftentimes from their cell phones, to find the attorney's phone number and contact them directly, and they do this more than we previously realized. Based on our observations, here's how we believe that it works in more and more cases. The client carries around an internet-connected device, usually an iPhone or an Android-powered phone. They have no need anymore to write the law firm's number down, and increasingly they don't even bother to save the number in their contacts list within their phone. Instead, here's what they do. They go to their cell phone, they type or dictate a web search for your law firm's name. If it's done right, your law firm's website comes up in the search engine results very high, if not right at the top. They click on the website, they look for your phone number at the top of the screen, they tap that phone number with their thumb, and the phone dials. Our data shows that this is not only how it increasingly is working, but it's how clients and potential clients increasingly expect it to work. Now, keep in mind, this is only based on observations from responsively designed websites, which means that the phone number is, at least in the case of the Lawlytics sites, it's visible, it's easy to touch, and it's accessible. If your firm's website is not touch-enabled when it's viewed from a mobile phone, there's a possibility, and in fact I would argue that it's a strong probability, that your clients that go to your website from their phone with that intention are going to be frustrated. Second, if your firm's website doesn't come up high in the search results for your firm, so in other words, they press the button on their phone, they dictate and find the law firm of, and it comes up with all these results and it's not yours, they're likely to click on any result in the search, usually on Google, but it could be Bing, it could be Yahoo, it could be other search engines. They're likely to click on any result that appears to be you. And if that result is a legal directory or has other phone numbers on the page that aren't yours, especially if it contains numbers of your competitors, your clients may get frustrated, or worse, they could be intentionally or unintentionally diverted to another law firm and maybe even your competitors. Let's look at some numbers. So at Lawlytics, we're in a unique position to observe and understand the collective behavior of clients and potential clients of law firms, we built our software infrastructure from the beginning to adapt based on the changing data landscape. Because of the way that the system is designed, we have the ability to filter data from a wide sample of visitors and sites. The numbers that I'm going to be talking about now were collected between the period of January 1st and April 1st of this year. We looked at traffic from randomly selected opt-in websites from different regions of the United States. We designed the study that way to reduce regional trends. For example, we figured that if we were to concentrate, say, in Seattle and use a high number of websites there because we have a lot of customers in the Seattle area, Seattle users may be more likely to use Microsoft-powered mobile devices than the general population throughout the country. And so we figured that that might throw off the data. And so we tried to spread it evenly throughout the country. Based on the data sources that we selected, we ended up, and we didn't know how many total visits we would get during this period based on the sites selected, but at the end of the recording period, we ended up with 733,346 visits that we basically considered in forming the information and the conclusions that we're about to share. To form an accurate picture of the data and eliminate biases, we purposely excluded certain types of traffic. We did not consider paid sources of traffic. These include pay-per-click advertising and other forms of search-based advertising, and also remarketing ads, which are the ones that follow you around once you've been on a website. The reason why we excluded them is that there are external things that influence the behavior of the customers that come through these ads. A higher bid could skew the data towards one site or another, and also a significant percentage of consumers use ad blockers, never see paid marketing messages. And we wanted to make sure that we were having a controllable sample. We think that people that click on the ads versus the organic listings and versus people that come from social media sources and other free sources of traffic may behave differently on websites. So this doesn't include any sources of paid traffic. As a practical matter, as a whole, Lawlytics members spend comparatively little on external advertising. And while that does provide for a better return on investment and more efficient use of marketing resources, we just didn't think that the sample size in that particular area was worth our time to do a separate study on based on the behavior of and the needs of our customer base. So that's the other inherent limitation. The biggest moving target recently in terms of user behavior is the percentage of mobile visitors. Now, we knew that this segment was significant, and we knew that it was growing, but the magnitude surprised us. And here from this table, you can see that nearly half of all visitors to attorneys' websites are arriving on mobile devices. These are raw numbers, and they don't reflect what the users do once they get to the site. It's just people that are clicking from the results or getting referred from social media. What they do once they get there based on the device that they're in is where this gets really interesting. But first, let's look at these percentages another way. In our sample of 733,346 visits, 329,000 and some change of them were done on mobile devices. When we get deeper into the data, we'll see that those 329,000 mobile visitors did things which reflect consumer behavior and reflect the mobile capabilities and efficiencies of responsive design and Lawlytics sites in particular. This data, though, these raw numbers, are agnostic of the platform used. These are the numbers that reflect human visits that intentionally entered the website, not necessarily knowing whether the site would look good on their mobile device or whether it would allow them to accomplish whatever it is that they came to that site to do. We'll look later at what the visitors in blue did during their Lawlytics-based sessions. For now, consider the consequences that would have occurred had the sites not been mobile optimized. Those 329,000 mobile visitors would have, at a minimum, a degraded experience. As we will see, many of them went to the site specifically to make contact with the attorney or the law firm. Had they not been able to tap with their thumb to call, they may have gone away. For other visitors, the stakes would be even higher. Those are the visitors who have a specific and urgent problem, most of the consumer-facing types of law. They just got arrested, they got served with divorce papers, they got a foreclosure notice, they need some triage, estate planning. They need to contact an attorney, they need to do it now, and they need to make a quick decision. When those visitors arrive on a site that is not mobile compatible, of course from a mobile device, what do? When there's no referral or emotional attachment and therefore no incentive whatsoever for them to pinch at the screen and squint at the screen as they try to digest information, it's pretty obvious what many of them will do. If that's your website, your competitors with good mobile websites that appear close to you in whatever traffic source those potential clients came from should thank you for literally refusing that business and making those clients available to them. I'm not trying to be melodramatic here, but the exit rate and the engagement rate that we see when a website looks good on mobile, and if you even just think of your own experience, you go to a website on your cell phone, if it's really hard to interact with, if it's confusing, if the menu is not available, you can't find a phone number or whatever, it's really easy to just hit that back button and move on. Those 329,000 some odd mobile visitors came on 4 main platforms. As you can see from the diagram, Apple's iOS, which powers iPhones and iPads, was the largest percentage. We believe that some of the difference between the 58.3% visitor share for Apple and the 40.2% share for Google Android-powered devices may be based on demographics. While Android shares have surpassed Apple's shares globally, in the United States, the purchasing power, and other studies bear this out, the purchasing power that flows through iPhones and iPads and the time that people still spend online on iOS-powered devices, which include iPads, is still extremely significant. Windows-powered devices, as you can see, represented a little more than 1% of the total visitors, and BlackBerry's representation is diminutive. What this tells us, at least currently, is that there's little benefit in designing specifically for anything other than Apple and Google-powered devices. However, it also doesn't make sense to alienate the 1.5% of visitors who arrive on Windows and BlackBerry phones. That's why responsive web design, which is what powers Lawlytics sites, is so important. Responsive design ensures that 1.5% of the visitors on those other devices are also accommodated from a design and user experience perspective. Now, this data that I'm going to go over here is also still foundational, so bear with me. I want to turn our attention now to what non-mobile devices use, or what non-mobile device users did, the 54.9%. In looking at these numbers, we lumped together desktop and laptop computer users. This is because laptops and desktops run on the same operating systems and use the same web browsers. In this study, the only meaningful operating systems from a statistics perspective were Microsoft Windows and Apple's OS X, also commonly referred to as OS X. It's a good idea to keep in mind that some users are going to be on 13-inch laptops or even smaller, and some are going to be on 27-inch high-resolution monitors or even on multiple monitor desktops. A truly responsive design will look great on whatever monitor or attached screen it's displayed on. We do see some legal web vendors who claim to have responsive design as a selling point, but who don't understand how to optimize for a whole range of viewing areas. So if you're with a vendor who has sold you on responsive design as a feature, it's really important that you look at how your website looks in all screen sizes. There's one major provider who I'm not going to mention because they're a competitor that their websites look pretty good in desktop view and they look pretty good on iPhone. But if you look at them in an iPad, it basically it displays roughly the same as it would in an iPhone, leaving a bunch of extra margin on the side, and it looks funky and it's still hard to find things. The idea with responsive is that you make it as easy as possible for all of your users to access all of the information that you present to them. When you talk about analyzing issues with responsive design, the most common problem is with background images and how they stretch. Some of the best looking legal websites start looking really bad on huge monitors because the background image is simply not large enough to fit and gets cut off. Some web designers take the approach of repeating images, which if not done seamlessly also tends to look really bad. I mentioned these design things not just to get digs in at our competitors and make you aware of that there are many different levels of what passes for responsive design. Instead, I mentioned these things because the data that we collected was based on Lawlytics-powered websites, which don't have any of these design issues that I just spoke of. So there's no degradation in the user experience. The number in terms of the visits is representative of visitors who don't necessarily know that the website that they're about to enter looks great on their laptop or desktop or cell phone. However, what they do afterwards, which is what we'll get into shortly, will likely differ depending on the quality of the design and the platform. So there were a total of roughly 400,000 visitors that viewed the websites on desktops and laptop computers. It's not enough to stop there because there was a wide range of operating systems and browsers used, and that can make a difference. 80.4% were on Windows, 18.4% on Mac, and there was a little sliver, about 1.3% total that encompassed all others, including Linux and Chrome OS, which were the next biggest ones. So looking at these numbers, it's logical to conclude that if a website is optimized to display on Windows and Macs, then all the bases are pretty much covered. To assume this would be wrong, and here's why. At Lawlytics, we take an agnostic stance about operating systems. We use Macs primarily for our designing and programming, although our video department prefers to use PCs because you can buy several times the processing power on the dollar. We use PCs here for our business planning. We also use Linux and Chrome OS machines because we test everything that we produce on every machine in every possible configuration. I'm using a PC here in this presentation, so please don't get me wrong. What I'm about to say is not that anything against Microsoft. I love their products just as I love Apple's products and platforms. But Macs are more normal when it comes to the experiences that users have when browsing the web. There are three major web browsers that are used on Macs. There are Google Chrome, Apple Safari, and Mozilla's Firefox. All use modern standards that consistently display modern websites well, regardless of the situation. Of the roughly 74,000 plus visitors that came in on Macs, only 3,400 of them came from an operating system version 10.5 or lower. 10.5 was also known as Leopard, was released in 2007 and was last updated in 2009. The reason why I mention that is because that's 4.5% of the visitors who were using an operating system that is too old to support the modern version of Google Chrome, which is currently the dominant web browser. Furthermore, even for those visitors who are on Leopard or even a little bit earlier than Leopard, most modern websites still display fairly well in Safari, which is the browser that's shipped with those older Mac operating systems. Of the roughly 325,000 Windows users that we observed in the study, the vast majority of them used Windows 7. In fact, there were 208,000 Windows 7 users, and Windows 7, it's a great operating system. It's stable. The more troubling point was that between Windows 8 and 8.1, which is the most recent version of the Windows operating system, there were only 50,000 visits, which kind of made us feel a little sorry for Microsoft that people aren't upgrading faster, especially because Windows 8.1 anyways, at least as I'm using it here, is a great operating system. The scary thing, the really frightening thing from a technology perspective, is that nearly 46,000 visitors in this study were still using Windows XP. Windows XP was released on August 29th, 2001, and earlier this month Microsoft officially ended support for it. So 13 years ago, the world and the internet were very different places. If you're still using Windows XP in your office, there's potentially security issues, and you have obviously the choice and the ability to upgrade. But as a tech company and as attorneys, we can't tell those potential clients that are out there, that 14.1% of PC-based visitors to legal websites, to upgrade beyond Windows XP. So instead, we have to make sure that we cater to the least common denominator. And speaking of the least common denominator, here's the real problem with Windows. Now, I'd like to give attribution for this cartoon, and I just couldn't find anything about who originally did it. This is, I'm sure a lot of you have seen this. This was circulating, it's been circulating for quite a while on the internet. I won't bore you with the gory history of the web browser wars, which Microsoft Internet Explorer won, at least for a time. And this cartoon depicts the most recent iteration of the browser wars. Let's see. So this little guy right here in blue, he's supposed to be Microsoft Internet Explorer off to the side eating glue while Google Chrome and Mozilla's Firefox battle it out. Web designers and programmers classically have hated Internet Explorer. This is because Internet Explorer, when they're dealing with it, in order to accommodate all its many versions and inconsistencies that those versions present, have to add conditional codes that cause the website's presentation to adjust to display depending on which version of that browser is used. It adds time, it cuts down on the ability to add features and make everything consistent, and it's expensive, both from a design, development, and testing perspective. While the most recent version of Internet Explorer, version 11, works very well, it's the older versions that, if you're not careful, can cause your law firm to leak vital potential clients. These numbers are not good. and I'll get to this in a moment. While there are currently more people using version 11 of Internet Explorer, at least in terms of the visits that we observed, the next most popular version was version 8 several versions ago, which is troubling, and that's this number right here. Even more troubling still is that there are still people using Internet Explorer 7. Neither of these support all of the modern features that modern websites should have, and so have to be adjusted. And to put it into perspective, the modern web is largely inaccessible for people using version 7. Websites look broken, and any attempt to do anything secure or confidential is very risky using that version of the browser. And anecdotally, this isn't reflected here. We only go back to 7. There was a single version, or there was a single visit, rather, from Internet Explorer version 6. And just to put it in perspective, Internet Explorer version 6 was released in August 2001. It was either released exactly with or right at the same time as Windows XP was originally released. And we normally won't give out any data about who the visitors to websites are and where they came from or anything, but this one is too ironic and too good to not share. That visitor, that lone visitor from Internet Explorer 6, came from within a US-based bank, one of the banks that was deemed too big to fail. So somewhere out there in one of the large banks that we won't name, there are still people using this very insecure ancient browser. If your practice is in Silicon Valley, these numbers here of Internet Explorer share probably don't apply to you, as your pool of potential clients is going to be more tech savvy and more up to date. It's imperative that you pay attention to the browser information for your visitors to your law firm, especially if you're not on Lawlytics. If I were you, I would not want to lose a single viable potential client based on browser compatibility issues. And even though we're in a mobile age, I would still insist that my law firm's website be backwards compatible to all extent possible back to Internet Explorer 7. We can throw out the users at the bank. It's simply, from a cost-benefit standpoint, not worth trying to make anything presentable on Internet Explorer 6 or earlier. So that's a bit of the raw data. The larger body of data is too big even for a whole day seminar. If these numbers got you thinking about measuring, tracking, and accounting for your firm's audience, then I've accomplished part of my goal here. Now I want to share with you some fun facts that we derived from the study. These will go fairly quickly, and then we're getting towards the end here. Mobile visitors, we found, are 22% more likely to call than desktop visitors. Now, this number somewhat surprised us. We thought there might be a little bit of a difference, but this difference is pretty profound, and we attribute it to several things. First, all of the Lawlytics powered websites used in this study have touch-to-call feature enabled. So in other words, they can touch the number with their thumb when they're on their phone and call. And these numbers that we noticed were especially true for consumer-oriented practices that we tracked, which included criminal defense, personal injury, and bankruptcy. The fact that many people anyways use their mobile phones as their primary phone probably contributed to this as well. We also see a lot of searches directly for attorneys or even direct entries into their website. So in other words, there's no search engine being used. The website is just being typed in. The website's called up and then the call is initiated. We also observed that searches for legal information oftentimes started out on a desktop-based machine and then resume within 15 minutes of first entering the site. When they resumed on that mobile device, calls then resulted from the mobile device during that session in statistically significant numbers. We think that what may be happening is that the potential client makes a determination to call the firm, then instead of keying in the phone number, goes to the website on their mobile phone and basically touches the number there and calls from there. We don't know what happens in the scenario where the law firm has a decent desktop version of their website, but a poor mobile site. But we suspect that if that migration from desktop to mobile were to happen and they were not to be able to click to call or easily find the number and copy it into their phone, that there may be some client frustration and maybe even some opportunity leakage. Another conclusion that we saw was that desktop visitors are 18% more likely to fill out a web-based form. This finding didn't surprise us. Forms are a lot easier to fill out on desktops and laptops and cell phones. We also track calls to form completion ratio. So in other words, how many people fill out a form on the website versus how many people initiate contact by calling the firm directly. And the data available to us suggests that at a minimum, law firms will receive 2 calls for every 1 form that's filled out on their website. And some firms have a ratio that's as high as 9 or 10 to 1. The important thing is to understand the point at which potential clients want to contact your firm and make it easier for them to do so, regardless of what device they happen to be on at the time. So in other words, you want to take out all of the potential roadblocks to them contacting you. You do it as soon as they have that emotional inkling to reach out to you. You want to make that as easy as possible. 15% of this should be traceable returning or trackable returning visitors returned on a different type of device for subsequent visits. This ties into what I was saying regarding users who jump from desktop to mobile, but that's not the whole story. So there's some limitations here. We're only able to track users who return via the same IP address when they move from one device to another. So, for example, if a potential client is at work on his or her computer during the day, and then say she comes home and resumes looking at that website using her iPad while lying in bed that night or watching TV, we won't necessarily know that that's the same person. The numbers above that 15% are based on the scenario where the visitor gets on a home desktop computer, for example, and then using the same internet connection, which would have the same IP address, returns on a phone or a tablet that's using their home internet connection versus a cellular connection. The behavior between home and work, or between commute and home or work, may differ. So we can't assign an overall number to this category at this point. So take this 15% number and this assertion with those limitations. We also found that at night, tablet users spend more time on sites and more time on pages than desktop or cell phone users. And what we picture, and we don't know the behavior for sure, but we picture that people are looking for attorneys or researching whatever problem they have, either while watching TV or relaxing in bed, or maybe even eating dinner on their iPads or whatever. And finally, users who are emailed links are much more likely to click on those links from their cell phones than they are from tablets or desktops. So, for example, if you have a if you have a link to your website in your email signature, and there's good arguments to do that, those clients or potential clients that click on that link from your emails are much more likely to do it and get an impression of you and your firm from mobile versus from desktop or from any other device. Now, I want to turn briefly to some of the things that you should, at a minimum, be measuring. We have seen too many lawyers who switch to Lawlytics from other companies think that they had one thing, only to realize once we show them how the objective data actually works, that the data had been manipulated by the previous webmaster or SEO person, presumably in order to justify what they were doing or what they were charging or whatever. It's really important to know what your users are doing on your site. This is especially true if you're actively developing business through your site. Say you resolve to spend, say, 2 hours a week producing informative content for your firm's website, or perhaps you hire somebody to produce some content for you to drive business and interest. If you know what types of articles, what types of content bring in visitors and convert those visitors to clients, your time or your money, depending on how you get the content in there, will be much better spent producing similar articles and pieces that play off of other successful articles. If you lack that information, you're treating your firm's external communication through your website like we would see an attorney treating a spaghetti type motion practice. So sure, you could file every single motion in limine under the sun, whether it's relevant or not. You could make every single objection during a trial to preserve the record or whatever other justification you use, but lost in all that noise of all those motions and objections may be the larger points of your case and maybe even your rapport with counsel, with the judge, and your likability. The same is true on the web, and there's no way to really know, and there's no way to really make strategic adjustments unless you measure. More pages per visit indicate greater interaction. So it's really important to know how many pages your visitors are looking at. If people only view one page, it's not likely indicative that they found what they're looking for or that they liked what they saw when they came to the site. Now, keep in mind that that number can be skewed downward, but in a good way, by people coming to your site specifically looking for your contact information, as we discussed earlier. But overall, as a general proposition, the more pages they view, the better. So as you go deeper, you can determine what pages cause them to move to other pages, which pages cause them to contact you, and which pages cause them to leave your site. Another important question is how long do they stay and really what they're doing when they're there. The longer somebody stays, the more we can infer that they're reading, they're looking around, they're processing information, and hopefully they're formulating a desire or a plan to contact you. It doesn't really matter how many pages they view in the first minute or so that they're there, if you have substantive content. The time on the site and the time on each page is more important to the larger picture than the sheer number of pages that they view. So in other words, if you have somebody that comes in and blazes through 20 pages of your website in the first minute, spending a few seconds on each page, there's no way that they got meaningful content from any of those pages. But if they came on and they viewed one page for 2 or 3 minutes, they read the whole thing, then they went to the next one and spent some time there, that's generally a good sign. And so I like to look at time on page as a more important factor than sheer number of page views. Incidentally, one great way to keep people on the pages and keep them engaged is to provide engaging videos. But if you do, make sure you don't just post links to videos hosted elsewhere, such as YouTube. You want to make sure that they're actually embedded in your page so you keep people on the page. I want to talk about exit rates. Exit rates is, basically when people come to your site and then they leave. High exit rates indicate a problem with a particular page. High bounce rates, which indicate that somebody comes in, the first page that they come to, they leave from. Either they shut the browser window down, they hit the back button, or they type something else into their browser and go to another site. Don't be fooled into placing what we like to call exit bait on your website. Exit bait are things that take your visitors who you, once you get them to your firm's individual website, are your captive audience, and that's where you want them. Exit bait takes them off of your site and transports them somewhere where they can get distracted, or worse, they can be exposed to your competitors. For example, several of the directory companies have lawyers linking from the lawyer's individual websites back to their directories. They do this, and my argument, and I have a lot of reasons for this, and I can get into those more at another time. It's against your interest, but it's in their interest, and they get you to do it by offering awards, badges, ratings, and things that you can embed directly into your website. The attorneys typically take this bait, put those things on their website, and then your perfectly viable potential clients become a commodity for the directory company to sell to other lawyers or to sell back to you. This practice could be the subject of a whole nother webinar, and I used to run a directory business myself, and would be happy to explain how the directory business works in another webinar. So if there's interest, let me know, and we'll put something together. Another common piece of quote-unquote exit bait is to Google Maps. Lazy webmasters oftentimes put links on attorneys' websites that say things like location or get directions, and the link then takes them off of the attorney's websites to Google Maps. Google Maps is a great product, and in fact we use it on Lawlytics, but it's a much better practice to embed the Google map directly into your website so that your captive audience isn't taken off of your website and back to Google. It's an especially cruel joke on attorneys who are paying for traffic from Google. So you buy traffic from Google, somebody goes from Google to your website, they click on location to try to find you, and then they're back to Google, where they can and likely will be exposed to ads from competitors, other distractions, checking their email, and so forth. Streamlining the flow of clients to your site using effective internet practices could also take up another seminar, and we already do this for our Lawlytics customers. But if you want to learn how that particular sausage is processed, let me know. We can also set something up for that, and that would be at least an hour webinar in and of itself. I want to conclude with a word of caution. We've just barely scratched the surface of the things that you can and should measure online. Before I go into this, though, you see that this word hits here. I used word art and I used Comic Sans font, and so I need to preface this so that my design department doesn't kill me. This is meant to be ironic. Ironic because hits is an antiquated notion, as is the use of Comic Sans font, as is the use of word art. If your webmaster is still talking in terms of hits, and that's how you're measuring the success of your web presence, it's time to start looking deeper, because you are being misled or you're just drastically behind the times. Hits are at this point virtually a meaningless notion, and so the other metrics that we talked about are much more indicative. That's really it for now. I want to thank you for attending. If you have questions for me, and I know this was a lot of data and it was all over the place in terms of what we did disclose, or if I can be of assistance to you in any way, please let me know. My contact information is here, and I'll leave the screen up for a couple minutes once I'm done talking, so you can grab it if you want and give me a call or shoot me an email anytime. We'll be sending out an announcement about our next webinar soon. In the meantime, I want to encourage you to visit our blog often for current information on everything affecting legal marketing and technology. We try to address any urgent issues as they arise on there, and we cover a lot of different topics. And also visit the Lawlytics University, which offers a wide range of training and educational materials on everything that most attorneys need to know to market their firms online. Because of the length of this and because of the size of our audience, we're gonna go ahead and end this now without doing a question and answer session. But like I said, just contact me whenever you have any questions. And thank you for attending.